Good morning, everyone. My name is Dennis Weiner, Chair of the Young Professionals Network, and this is not PNC Arena. Whether you're just getting out of bed, sitting at your breakfast table, or a couple of hours into your workday, welcome to our first virtual YPN program. We're so appreciative of everyone's flexibility during this time of social distancing to have this morning's program virtually. In recent weeks, we've all seen how critical a role technology plays in business as meetings have moved to an online format. With that, more than ever, we would love to hear your feedback today. So please be on the lookout for the event feedback email, and when you receive it, take a few moments to share your experiences from today's events. We hope that by the end of today's event, you have gained valuable takeaways. I hope you will join us at the other upcoming virtual events we have planned. I also look forward to seeing you at other YPN events in person once we are able to gather again safely. Let's kick off this morning's program with a special thank you to our Programs Task Force. Our Programs Task Force is comprised of an amazing group of volunteers. The content their team delivers at each of our programs is exceptional, and I'm excited for you to experience this morning's program, as well as the future programs they produce this year. During this morning's program, we will learn how technology continues to advance in the workplace, a topic which is very timely given our current environment. If you have any questions during today's program, or you have some already, please submit them using the question feature on the toolbar located on the right of your screen. At the end of this morning's program, we have set aside some time for Q&A, where we will present these questions to our speakers. We will try to get through as many of those questions as we can. A big thank you to the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber has been incredible in engaging with businesses and creating these virtual platforms that we're enjoying today. Also, a big thank you to our YPN board. The YPN board continue to meet and explore innovative ways for our membership to engage with one another. To stay up to date on all things YPN, check out our email updates and social media channels. Follow our social media pages, and during today's event, share facts, memorable quotes, and what you've learned by tagging us. We're on the following platforms. We're on Facebook, Raleigh YPN, LinkedIn, Raleigh YPN, Instagram, Raleigh YPN, Twitter, @Raleigh Chamber, with the hashtag Raleigh YPN. Join our conversation during the program on Twitter using the hashtag Raleigh YPN. Even though we're not physically together, let's stay connected. And let's get hashtag Raleigh YPN trending this morning. I'd like to take a few moments to thank our sponsors from today's events. Our series sponsors are Carolina Hurricanes, Diamonds Direct Crabtree, Green Resources, Happy and Hale, and UNC Keenan Flagler Executive MBA programs. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We appreciate your support in making YPN possible. It is my pleasure to introduce this morning's first speaker, Peggy Pranchsky. Peggy Pranchsky is currently the Vice President of Data Science and AI for Advanced Auto Parts. Pranchsky is known in the data science industry for transforming organizations with building and developing high-performing data science teams, setting AI strategies, and developing industry-leading products. Pranchsky has more than 10 years of professional experience in the field of data science. She's won several awards for her data science work, most notable the Director of National Intelligence's Meritorious Unit Citation. She holds a Master of Science degree in analytics and a bachelor's degree in mathematics with a minor in computer science. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me today. Good morning, everyone. My name is Peggy Pranchsky. I'm the VP of Data Science and AI at Advanced Auto, and I'm really excited to be able to be here with you all today virtually to discuss a couple of different talent trends we're seeing at Advanced, and then a little bit of conversation about AI and machine learning and how that's changing our world around us, and then how we're taking advantage of that at Advance. So with that, next slide, please. One could argue that we're in the middle of a fourth industrial revolution. The size and shape and skill set of the workforce is really changing. And what I would say is that we're seeing a lot of different tech jobs that are changing the way that the world is experiencing AI and machine learning. Over 3/4 of executives in tech predict contingent workers will substantially replace full-time employees by 2022, changing the shape of the industry. And we believe that AI will bring up to 58 million new jobs internationally. And many future jobs will require a higher cognitive maturity. So things that can be automated and things that are manual tasks, highly manual that we do every day, will probably be phased out, and we will then evolve into more creative thinking that a computer just has challenges doing. So we're starting to see that come forward, and really starting to change the landscape of the workforce that we're seeing. So next slide. So what we have seen, we have to drive innovation and creativity in our workplaces and focus and enable a differentiated value proposition. So what leaders do and say are the things that really are changing the purpose and the culture and help to thrive and produce innovation. And tech innovation drives tech places to work differently. Even before this current situation, Advance put forward a flexi place option, meaning that it didn't matter where you worked, it's where you're most productive. And so before even COVID-19, Advance had put into place a capability to work from anywhere. So work from your home was something that was easy for Advance to transition into because it had already started enabling this opportunity for employees. We also find that top talent really wants to see flexibility, opportunity to learn and grow, and a really collaborative environment. And how do we start to set that foundation and that culture, not only at Advance, but in the industry in general? So next slide. So we find that we need flexibility, strong healthcare options, and a strong financial tie to make sure that every piece of what a team member cohort values, we have a component. So wellness programs, discount gyms, on-site fitness, these are things we're starting to see more and more value that we need to make sure we're challenging ourselves to be able to accommodate. And flexible schedules in addition to remote work. So flexi places, work where it makes sense, flexible schedules. We're not all creative at the exact time. We're not all creative from 9 to 5. So how do we enable people to be in a setting that helps them establish creativity and innovation, and do that on the time and give their mind space for that creativity and innovation? So these are things that Advance is considering and putting in place strategies to be able to enable these for team members across our entire corporate office. So next slide. And this is something that is really, not only do we talk about how to join Advance, but you join, you develop, you thrive. You join a team member network, you develop, you thrive. And so how do we make sure that we have customer and people focused team members? How do we have career paths and development plans that help develop every team member? And how do we make sure they're thriving in their work-life harmony? And so we want to make sure we have that full cycle and be able to really help a team member grow and establish themselves in Advance. So next slide. And now I'm going to pivot a little bit. As I said, we're looking at initially the trends that we're seeing to enable innovative workplace. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about AI and machine learning and why we have to make those pivots to get the top talent. So AI machine learning, I'd say, has already had a profound impact on the world. Most of you might have turned on Netflix in the last month or so, and Netflix is constantly using machine learning algorithms to understand what recommendations are best for you and what type of entertainment entertains you in particular. Google Assistant. If you ever have a chance to watch some great videos on Google Assistant, making phone calls to schedule hair appointments, where the receptionist actually thinks that that there's a person on the other line, and it is a robot talking to them, an AI device talking to them, scheduling a hair appointment for an individual. These things are already taking place and are having that profound impact on the world. Next slide. So what really is AI and machine learning? It's really all about predictions. So when you think about how we have in the past looked at businesses, we wait for a report to come in and tell us, how did sales look last week? There's a lot of past tense used. How did sales look? What happened last week? What are some things that are increasing? What are some decreasing? You look at charts and you try to figure out what happened. But what AI and machine learning enable is predictions. What's going to happen? What could happen? And how do we position ourselves to affect that curve before we get there? So what does the mix of our product look like 5 years from now? We're seeing car sales right now, and we know that every car is made up of thousands of parts that each have a statistical likelihood to fail. And how do we find out what's likely to fail and predict that and get ahead of it? So before our customer is on the side of the road with a problem, we're there predicting what's going to happen and can enable alerts to let that customer know that something is likely to fail. This is the part that's likely to fail. Here, let me help you get to a professional or get into our stores, and we'll help you figure out the right part. So next slide. And so, yeah, thank you. So 3 key trends that are driving down the cost of prediction, and why are we doing this now, is because there's cost of data storage and processing is going drastically down. So you can store so much more data than you could in the past. And at this point, you basically want to collect almost everything you can because it's so cheap to store. And there's so much more data available. So you have more data available, you can store more, you're be able to use more applied new mathematics from machine learning to deep learning, and this all drives down the cost of prediction and makes it even more attainable. And when you drive down the cost of something, you make it more widespread and you use it in ways you never thought you could. So driving down the prediction increases the usability, and we're really seeing that now. So next slide. So how do we use predictions at Advance? Well, a big part of predictions, we take into account weather factors, which change the wear and tear. We know the industry has said for many years that cold weather actually kills batteries. But what we start to know is that what particular temperatures does that affect the batteries, and what regions have those temperatures at different times, and can we get ahead of it? So when we're predicting when we see the weather forecast that predict the weather to have this type of cold snap, we know, hey, that's when the batteries are going to go. Let's make sure we stock more batteries in that area, and let's alert our customers that this is the time to replace their battery. Changing the shopping cart experience, predicting the next product to buy. You're probably familiar with this when you go into Amazon and it tells you these are the things that you're likely going to also want to buy. Well, same thing with auto parts. Next product to buy is what are the things that are either another thing you might not have thought of, you need to do a job, or what is it, it's something that you need to buy in the future because if this part is failing, likely this other part is going to fail shortly. And being able to really personalize the customer experience. So when we start to know information about the vehicle that you drive, the way that you drive it, we can start to, again, personalize that experience for you. So we're able to be right there for the customer at the very earliest time through these use of predictions. So with that, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of you. I'll be coming back at the end to answer any questions, and I'll hand it off right now. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Peggy. We appreciate you sharing your insight into how technology is advancing the work that Advance Auto Parts does. We are all so fortunate to have Advance Auto Parts as part of the Raleigh community. The new headquarters that Advance is building in North Hills demonstrates that, as Peggy mentioned, what their leaders do and say truly is driving innovation. Our next portion of today's program will be a panel discussion moderated by Alan Cross. Alan joined DivePlane after 20 years of experience in sales and operations with various global ERP software providers. Alan has successfully built several business units from the ground up at multiple companies and was an essential part of the team that made Carriage Commercial Systems ERP software an attractive acquisition in 2015. As the Chief Commercial Officer at DivePlane, Alan drives the business sales and marketing strategy and manages customer relationships. Alan has a wealth of experience across multiple industries, including distribution, manufacturing, defense, and logistics and supply chain. Alan has a Master's of Science in Logistics and Supply Chain from Cranfield University. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Dennis. Nice to speak to you. And hi, everyone else.
Joining Alan this morning is Phaedra Boinodiris. Phaedra is a fellow of the RSA and has focused on inclusion and technology since 1999. She holds 5 patents and has served on the leadership team of IBM's Academy of Technology, focusing on kicking off internal startups that range from IBM's first serious games and advanced simulation program to IBM's first K-12 program. Phaedra is currently pursuing her PhD in AI and ethics due to a generous scholarship from the European Union in collaboration with NYU. She has founded or acted as an advisor for multiple digital inclusion programs. She co-founded WomenGamers.com, where she launched the first national scholarship program for women to pursue degrees in game design and development. She won the United Nations Women of Influence in STEM and Inclusivity Award in 2019, received the Social Innovator Award by IBM in 2018, received the 2014 Keenan Flagler Young Alumni Award, became a fellow of the American Democracy Institute in 2011, and in 2007 was recognized by Women in Games International as being one of the top 100 women in games industry. Phaedra holds a BA and an MBA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Thank you for joining us this morning, Phaedra.
My pleasure, happy to be here.
Rounding out our panel this morning is Alicia Baker-Eve. Alicia is the Director of Product Marketing for Citrix, leading the go-to-market strategy and execution for the Citrix Workspace product. A passionate storyteller, Alicia specializes in understanding the value her products and services deliver to customers and developing successful marketing strategies to communicate to target market segments. Prior to Citrix, she was a senior product marketing manager and team lead for the ThinkPad notebook product line at Lenovo. Alicia enjoys staying active, including competing in several races and triathlons, practicing yoga, and chasing after her 2 young sons. She earned an MBA in Marketing and Product Innovation Management from North Carolina State University and a BA in Journalism from The Ohio State University. Good to see you this morning, Alicia.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate everyone joining us this morning. At this point, Alan, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks for the introductions. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and I hope you're all keeping well. And a personal thanks from me. You actually made me put a shirt on this morning, so thanks very much. I almost feel human again, so I really appreciate it. Delighted to be the panel moderator for Alicia and Phaedra this morning. They're both extremely talented individuals and great human beings, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to say this morning, which from my experience I know is a hell of a lot. So strap yourself in and let's get going. And I don't think we've got Phaedra on video, so it's just myself and Alicia. But I know Phaedra, you'll get to hear Phaedra, so we'll make it work. So just as a startup for each of you, these are unprecedented times. So if you can, just spend a minute or two, just tell us how your companies have pivoted over the last few weeks. Starting with Alicia.
Yeah, well, thanks, Alan. Again, really excited to be here and to have this conversation. From a Citrix standpoint, we're actually in a really unique position because we've spent the better part of 30 years helping our customers spin up and have elements of remote working from a secure standpoint in their environments. And over the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've been hyper focused on helping our customers adapt to these dramatically changing circumstances, and not just from a product standpoint, but then also, from an information and knowledge standpoint, so that they can enable their employees to work remotely, securely, and successfully.
Thanks, Alicia. And Phaedra?
A similar story. We too at IBM have been well prepared and set up to be able to do remote work. I would say that some of the key changes has been really to try to connect people to each other in an informal way. So having virtual martini hours in the evenings, or just walking around with our laptops and seeing people's backyards and gardens. It's been interesting. It's just the shift in terms of how we're using the technology as a means to connect.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, there's been a couple of reports in the press over the last 72 hours around Zoom fatigue. People feeling that their day is hyper managed and extremely formal. And I think I urge everyone to still remember those days, if you can, of just drive-by conversations, stopping by people's desks. How do you now do that in this new age of video conferencing? And don't forget the simple hello. Reach out to some of your work colleagues and just have a conversation with them, rather than just be totally dominated by work. Have a social call. It won't hurt. So that's great. Thanks for
that idea. I think that's really an important point. In fact, today we're having a big arts and crafts show. So we're going to be showing off paintings and crafts and just something completely different, not really associated with work at all, but fun as a means to connect.
Great. I mean, we are living by video conferencing right now. So Alicia, what do you see now as the biggest advantages and disadvantages being fully immersed and reliant on this type of workplace technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, obviously a lot of us are having to learn to adapt quickly. And I think I love, Phaedra, that you guys are having the art show, because I think that's so much a part of what we have to, think through from a management standpoint. And, Alan, to your point, when you take cultures that are primarily in-person based and you try to lift and shift them, to a more remote setting, it's not a perfect match. And so you really have to think through, what are the elements that made your team successful, or your organization is successful, and how you can leverage technology in that way, to keep those elements, but also thinking through what adjustments do you have to make, overall. And, from a virtual standpoint, we are essentially inviting people into our home ecosystem, from, a video standpoint, you all can see what my bonus room looks like, and we're getting to know each other's pets and children. And this is really requiring that organizations rethink not only how they manage, their employees, but what managers, how they're enabled to manage at that much more personal level. And I think that there will be elements that we all uncover throughout this situation that we want to take forward. For example, there's all kinds of reports in the media and conversations around the fact that, households that have two working parents are now suddenly getting to spend valuable time together, with their children that, was missing, before. And so as we start to think through the next, weeks and months, what are the elements that have come out of this that are positive, and how do we incorporate them on a personal level, into our lives, but then also from an organization, how do we provide that flexibility, via technology and, both personal and professional support to allow our employees that flexibility to design their work life that ultimately, fits what they're looking for.
Fantastic. And Phaedra, same for you. What have you seen as, or what do you see as the main advantage and disadvantages of being immersed in this technology, almost to 100%? We're completely reliant on it. So, what do you see?
Well, there are many advantages with respect to the kinds of things that we have access to, whether it's not just being advantaged to be able to work from home, but also telehealth and other things. The disadvantage, of course, is for those who don't have access, who don't have broadband access. If you don't have access to the internet, or you don't have a smartphone or a computer at home, you are truly, truly disadvantaged. And I think what this global pandemic has really unveiled in a big way is this digital divide, this economic disparity of groups that just, especially with not just the idea of not being able to work from home, but to be able to have remote education for your kids. If you don't have broadband, for them to jump on and communicate with their teacher, to get access to things like Khan Academy, it really does underscore just this massive divide.
So just following on from your point there, Phaedra. So do you see that as a personal responsibility, an employer responsibility, state, federal? How do you see that mix of ensuring that fairness exists, that should we have to go through this again, that everyone is taken along fairly on that journey?
I think that this is a national responsibility and a state responsibility. And I know that over many, many years, the state of North Carolina has really worked hard to get broadband access out to rural parts of the state. The next step is, of course, getting it to that last mile where it could be in households. I know there's an initiative to potentially use school buses that are powered by Wi-Fi to communities that do not have this kind of access. But I think it's really important that we keep our eye on the ball and make sure that our initiatives are inclusive.
Fantastic.
And Alan, just to follow up on that, I mean, I think that, again, that's a really great point. And I think, these disparities aren't new. We've known that there is this economic divide, and we've seen, all kinds of studies about it. But I think what this situation has highlighted is how pervasive it is. And, yes, I agree with Phaedra. I think that this is absolutely, a state and federal issue. However, I also think that now that we've seen this problem at a very personal level, I think that as a community, this is now something that we can't ignore anymore. It's not just numbers and an economic report. This is something that is affecting our very communities, and I'm hoping that we come out of this as a community focused on giving everyone access to what is needed, so that everyone can take advantage of the flexibility potentially from a work standpoint, but then also the educational resources that will prepare us for the future.
Right. Thank you both. And just sticking with Alicia, now that more people have been fully immersed in the home working environment, with that added flexibility factor, will that weigh more heavily on their job selection in the future, do you think?
Absolutely. That's kind of the short answer. And I think that, we're hearing this from a customer standpoint, and we're also seeing this, from a market and media. Citrix recently partnered with OnePoll to conduct a survey of employees to understand exactly, how we're adapting, to this situation and this sudden requirement that we work remotely. And one of the surprising aspects that came out of it is the fact that almost 30% of survey participants indicated that they will be interested in and looking for jobs and companies that allow them to permanently work from home. And that's a complete shift in what we've seen from the past. And so I think that now organizations are getting to see that they can provide that flexibility, and we're seeing that there are positive aspects of having that from a workforce standpoint. Whereas in the past, my company might have told me that I needed to work from 9 to 5 in a specific place, and now we're seeing that's not something that all of us want to do moving forward, and that we might not even be doing our best work in that scenario. And, of course, this benefits working parents, where they're going to be able to, to be more involved with their children, and potentially women who made a decision not to return to the workforce because of the lack of flexibility. There's a potential now that this will allow the workforce to be more diversified, overall.
Yeah, it goes to the point that Peggy was making. People are not necessarily at their most productive between 9 and 5 for lots of different reasons. So do you think companies should now embrace more flexibility?
I absolutely think so, because I think that if the survey that I mentioned is any indication, companies that do are going to see better talent acquisition and retention. And there's absolutely a technology part of this, right, where companies need to provide technologies that provide an impactful employee experience, a fluid ability to collaborate, both from a chat standpoint, but then also sharing documents, things like that, right? These are kind of the practical elements of a remote force technology stack. But I think what is even more interesting is that we've really gotten an opportunity to see who companies really are, through this massive disruption. And companies that I think have adapted well and have provided support for their employees and transparency, both personally and professionally. As an employee, you're going to be more apt to stay with that company and potentially become a net promoter, in the marketplace. And I don't think we're very far from seeing summaries and insights of how companies reacted on sites like Glassdoor. And I think that will absolutely factor in addition to the flexibility on how job seekers, and also employees see their companies in the future and decide, what's going to be best for them fit-wise.
Yeah, I agree. I think your last point about how companies are perceived, I think a number of people looking for new roles will look at those companies, and the question will be asked, how did that company perform in 2020? It will be almost a default question, and the true colors of the company might well shine through. Just want to stick on that just with Alicia 1 minute before I drop a question on Phaedra. We've got over 100 young professionals on this call. What advice would you give to them in terms of how they can help push their companies in that direction? What can they do themselves?
Yeah, leaders really emerge, during times of disruption and ambiguity. And, I think the employees that will succeed and the future leaders, they will be the ones that can manage through the distraction and stay focused on the activities and, KPIs, if you will, that will help drive the business forward. And so if there's one key takeaway, for this group, I encourage everyone to, look at your leadership and your organization and what they are focused on during this time, and prioritize, your work, your activities, and the results that you're trying to drive to help, further that focus in a positive way.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Alicia. Just turning to Phaedra and getting back to perhaps the technology type question. Do you think the COVID pandemic will make companies speed up worker displacement by automation, AI, and robotics?
That's a great question, Alan. Well, we already see some of this in the news, right? The idea that you know, the use of technology in order to not only solve problems associated with the COVID pandemic, so the use of artificial intelligence to determine patterns, to come up with potential vaccines or vaccinations or medications faster. But I think also we've been seeing some reports with respect to the use of drone delivery, robotics that can replace workers who then would otherwise become sick. It's definitely a space that we need to continue to watch, right? Because we are on the cusp of a technology tsunami in the form of artificial intelligence and robotics and automation. And I think things like the global pandemic is certainly a catalyst to see how is it that these technologies could be used to solve problems. And when you've got a large number of the workforce that could potentially become sick by showing up to work, then you're going to see a lot more organizations looking at investments in things like drones and robots to replace people. So it's a space to watch.
Yes, it certainly is. And just looking at, if you like, more on a global scale, I think it's fair to say and again for Phaedra, many of the G7 countries would probably admit they're probably ill prepared for the COVID pandemic. Education is facing a huge challenge during this crisis. So what can be done differently in the future, do you think?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, my biggest concern with respect to education, to remote education, is the disparity associated with broadband and internet access. This, I think, is highly, highly concerning and something that we all need to be hyper vigilant of and aware of as communities. I think also making sure that we continue to support our teachers is really important, because for many of these teachers, it's the very first time that they're teaching classes online, that they're using video conferencing software, for example. So as technologists, I think we've got an opportunity to really support teachers and help wherever we can. I think also it's interesting to see just the embracing of ed tech and that entire industry, and just seeing it skyrocket. I think other things that we could be looking at within the future. I know there have been some wonderful pilots associated with giving students credit for things that they learn, not just within formal learning settings, but informal learning settings in the form of micro-credentials. And I think this is another space where we could potentially see a lot more investment within the future. Because if you go to, let's say, a rural school that doesn't have a computer science teacher or curriculum, you should be able to go and take an online class and get school credit for that. Going to your community college's virtual live streaming class that teaches Python 101 and be able to get school credit, a micro-credential that you as a student could then control. I know that the state of North Carolina is also looking into this and has been doing some credentialing of its teachers in this way. But I think watching this idea proliferate, I think could be very good.
Fantastic. We've nearly run out of time, and I can tell the audience we had about 10 other questions that I was going to throw at Alicia and Phaedra. So we'll probably save that for another time. For the audience, firstly, thank you to Alicia and Phaedra. Brilliant. I've really enjoyed working with you on this. I know you feel passionately about this topic, and that certainly shone through today on this, and I hope it did for the audience. I think for everyone else on the call, embrace technology, but don't hide behind it. We are reliant on it now, but that shouldn't take away the need for that personal human touch. Although you can't physically be in the presence of your co-workers, you should still be forming those relationships, building that trust. If it's with customers, your staff, if you're in a leadership role. So don't use technology as an excuse, and really challenge how your company is adapting, and consider what changes will be permanent in the future. So really think about, certainly going forward beyond the pandemic, I think this is a lot of opportunity for people to stand up and shine. If you can, this is a once in a generational situation that we're living through. And if you can demonstrate you've got the ability to still move the needle on your business, drive the business forward, you will do well. And I look forward to hearing some of those stories with you personally in the future. So again, thanks to Alicia and Phaedra, and I'll hand back to the team.
Thank you, Alan.
Great. Thank you, Alan. Well, Alan, Phaedra, and Alicia, thank you all so much for joining us this morning and sharing your insight with us all. I very much enjoyed this program, and I'm sure our members did as well. For those watching this morning, my name is Matt Douglas, and I manage the Young Professionals Network for the Raleigh Chamber. Normally, I'm working behind the scenes at all of our YPN events, and it's not typical at our morning programs that I get to be in front of everyone. But as we all navigate this new normal, I'm glad to have the opportunity to be joining you all this morning. I'm excited that we are able to continue offering virtual events during this time of social distancing, and look forward to seeing you all again in person when it's safe to do so. We're now going to transition to the question and answer portion of this morning's program. We've already received some great questions. If you have a question that you would like to ask our speakers, please submit your question using the question feature on the toolbar located to the right side of your screen. We will try to answer as many as we can. Before we jump into Q&A, Peggy, would you be able to rejoin us?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome, great. So typically this is when you would walk back on stage and we would all applaud. So thanks for coming back. All right, so we received a lot of good questions. I'll dive in. None of them are specifically addressed to anyone, but if one is, I will let everyone know. So first question is, how do we think the current market and environment will affect technology development and innovation? And Phaedra, one thing that I just wanted to point out is during your time speaking, you had said something about a technology tsunami. And it's funny because as we were thinking of titles for this program with our programs task force, one of the titles that they threw out was Tech Tidal Wave. And again, looking back, this program was supposed to be in March, prior to everyone switching to work from home. So how do you see technology development innovation changing as this continues, or as we go back to a sense of normalcy?
Well, I'm thrilled that you are also leaning towards the tsunami idea. We're using the word tidal wave because it's so true. We're really seeing just a proliferation in the use of these technologies to make businesses more efficient, to solve very complex problems. I think that in this era, using technology to solve hopefully issues around social justice, as I mentioned, with respect to things like ensuring that disadvantaged groups are included with respect to things like telehealth and remote education. And I think this is really important. I think also the use of artificial intelligence as a mechanism to potentially, come up with patterns for a cure faster than we would otherwise use. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. I think also with respect to things like supply chains and thinking about how is it that, after all of these decades, what happened with our supply chains was that things like black swan events, which a global pandemic certainly is one, were not considered a priority within supply chains. It was always just in time, right? Making sure that you're bringing materials and supplies at exactly the right time that you need it, without really focusing on stockpiling for black swan events. I think we're seeing some very interesting uses of technologies, like things like smart contracts, predictive analytics, to be able to see when there's going to be spikes in need based on what's coming through within the news, specifically with respect to PPE. These are the things that I'm excited to see coming down the pike.
Yeah, and Matt, if I can just add on, some other elements that we've seen, from our customers include the need for security. That's obviously been in the news, quite a bit, and it's not that it wasn't a consideration before, but now that literally everything we do is digital, it has increased in importance. And then the other element is that I think that companies see, and I think this will be even more impactful and important in the future, is that companies need to provide a compelling employee technology experience. We were all willing in the office to deal with some of the, dare I say, idiosyncrasies that sometimes, company software can, comes up when we're trying to use it. But when you are completely remote and you're 100% reliant on your technology stack that your company's providing to do your job, now I think that will factor in much more heavily in the future in terms of companies that, from as an employee standpoint, where we choose to work, and ultimately, putting pressure on companies to deliver and invest in technologies that Phaedra mentioned in terms of helping us do our jobs better.
I think the other thing, when you mentioned, Matt, about the tsunami, there's a responsibility for people embracing technology, that they understand the power that they've got. A lot of the new technology will be human-centric. Phaedra mentioned it was looking at potential cures. I've heard a lot of stories from various state governors talking about track and trace technology. So that's all going to be very much human-centric. So there's a responsibility to ensure that data privacy is maintained, that the data is used ethically and responsibly, and that's really important. And I think where Peggy's outlined superbly how they're embracing AI, and Phaedra has done the same, and machine learning, there is an absolute social responsibility to ensure that the data is used ethically, that all these human-centric technologies are deployed with the right purpose. And I think if we do that, and if everyone understands that technology is generally outpacing human understanding of that technology, just to pause, stop, think, and realize the impact of that, then we should be in a better place. But it's a really important aspect of it.
To add on to what Alan just said, IBM just came out with a Institute for Business Value report on AI and ethics. It is a really important read. It basically, we did a survey of a number of different C-level executives with respect to their thinking about how they approach ethics within their organizations. And it just highlighted the desperate need for being able to have ethics boards within organizations to really be able to do deep dives into thinking through what are the unintended consequences of technologies, and making sure that you don't, for example, have your CTO as the head of your ethics board. It's well worth your time.
Great, awesome. One other question that we just got that I think is very timely for people that consider themselves young professionals. Since most of the audience has approximately 20 to 30 working years ahead of them, what are the top technologies that are going to change business over the next 5 to 10 years that they should be preparing for? Example, AI, 5G, cloud technologies, etc. And if so, how should they prepare?
Yeah, so this is Peggy. I think I just like to say that I am biased towards data because of my role, but I do think that being able to understand and manipulate data is going to be a game changer for any individual in the next 20 to 30 years. Staying on top of yes, cloud computing, but also things like a light programming language like Python to be able to manipulate data in a way that will kind of set you aside from your peers, but also help you develop into a way that, you know, I talked about how a lot of manual tasks will likely be automated in the future. Using your creative mind to put data sets together that are going to be unique and different and make a different value proposition, I think is really where you should focus as you start to move in your career.
And I just to add, you know, Peggy, you know, she highlighted something I think really important towards the end. You know, at the end of the day, it's not about the technology itself, it's about what you do with the technology. And a skill set that I think will be incredibly important in the future is to be able to leverage technology to think deeply in a topic and be able to connect the dots and provide that value both from a you know, a business standpoint, but uncovering opportunities. So, you know, being able to switch off your phones or use technology to give you space and time to think and identify you know, identify whether it's through data or other means these areas of opportunity for innovation.
So I'll just look back. That's a fantastic question, and I'm the old guy. I remember when, like, time before mobile phones. But if you just look 20 years ago, IBM sold the first flash drive. Bluetooth was launched in 1999, but was only really embraced in the early 2000s. Now, most of you is going to be sitting at home now going, what, hey? The thing is, we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in 20 years' time. We generally don't, because 20 years ago, we wouldn't have known that we were going to be sitting doing this today, where we could be fully immersed in technology. It can enable us to still run our companies. My first job back in the day, I was writing memos using carbon paper and sending things out in the post to communicate with people. It wasn't all black and white then, but it was a fair time ago. But the technology leaps are exponential. So in 20 years' time, we'll definitely be on hoverboards by then. Cars will be something else. Who knows? And if anyone can use their crystal ball to really look and really consider that and how a company can ready themselves for it, then all power to you. But for me, I've still hopefully got 20 years left in business. I'm really excited about it. That's the thing, is to embrace it, to be champions of the technology that can enable the business. Look to stretch you and your organization to say, that can really help us. Try and ignore the ones that perhaps don't, but the ones which can really help the business, help with a diverse workforce, that you're always thinking ahead of the curve, is a sort of technology that you want to be embracing.
Awesome. I think Alan and I both grew up watching the Jetsons.
Yeah.
One thing I would add just really quickly, so many people I'm sure on this call do not self-identify as a coder. Just recognize, if you want to be a leader in things like video games, esports, government and public policy, social justice, fashion, like all of these spaces, regardless of whether you identify as a coder or not, you're going to need to know something about technology. In particular, and again, I'm slanted more towards this, is artificial intelligence, right? Think about when Mark Zuckerberg was brought in front of Congress to testify, and how little our legislators knew about the technology, the business models behind social media to be able to ask the right kinds of questions. It is imperative that we as citizens of this world understand enough about this technology so that we can make a difference within our industries.
That's great. Thank you, Phaedra. All right, and then for sake of time, we'll make this our last question. In your professional or personal life, what is one app or technology which has provided the most benefit or allowed you to improve perhaps in an area of previous weakness, such as organization, time management, etc.?
So I'll take that. First, I've been a big proponent of online grocery shopping. I have two boys, they're 8 and 10 years old. They eat they're all the time. And I have to say, you know, as a working professional, going to the grocery store, spending 2 hours at the grocery store to get through the grocery store, even before COVID, was something that I just I don't have the time for. And I have had an Instacart subscription, and I always say it's $12 about a month, and Netflix is like 14 right now. I would drop my Netflix before I drop my Instacart. But it's those types of things that just the common convenience of not having to go to the grocery store, I can make up a list as I go, those types of things. That has saved me, according to Instacart, 177 hours since I started shopping with Instacart.
Wow.
And that was definitely worth every single hour. I'm able to use that time now to be with my family, and I think that's just the most important thing I can do.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, same, right? Peggy and I both have young children, so any opportunity to leverage technology to spend less time on things that aren't really super fun is definitely a benefit. I think, you know, even just expanding on that, I think that obviously we're here on a webinar, right, with video, and I think that we've all had cameras on our phones and on our computers for a long time, but we just weren't willing to use them. I think that for some people it felt, you know, intrusive to invite colleagues into your home, and so I think that's been, as somebody who is an extrovert and, you know, needs to see people's faces and reaction and identifies that on an emotional level, that has become a lifesaver. And what I found, even personally, you know, now we're using these types of technologies for me to talk to my, you know, my family and friends in different states. And we're all kind of looking at each other and saying, like, why didn't we do this before? This is awesome. And so I think that this medium overall is going to definitely be something that I know personally I take with me, but I think others will as well.
Yeah, I think even getting broader than that, for me, the internet. I mean, none of this would exist without that foundation. And I'm absolutely with Peggy. You know, online ordering is a game changer. Has been for a long time. When I was in the UK, it was definitely online ordering, grocery ordering, and delivery was absolutely paramount. I think so the internet will be, from a technology perspective, as we all see it. I'll tell you what I've appreciated the most recently is my bike. That's a technology, that was a technology advancement of its day. Being able to get out and go for a ride and break this mold of that my home, which has now been invaded by my work, some form of escape while we can. So certainly I've really appreciated that. That's for sure. Might not be the answer that people were looking for, but certainly
back to the basics.
I would suggest the internet would be at one end and my bike would be the other one.
Can you imagine if this global pandemic had happened in the 80s? I mean, prior to the big, I mean, I've been thinking about that, like how much worse it would have been. So I totally agree with everything the other panelists had added. Since I too have young kids at home, I'll just make a massive plug for EdTech. Thank you, Khan Academy. Oh my God. Also, some local companies, we've been using their serious games. Plasma Games has a fantastic chemistry game called PsyOps for elementary school, middle school, and high school kids. Even games for entertainment like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, there's a discovery mode where you can go and interview all these figures from ancient Greece and go check out the old buildings as they once were and do research reports. Totally cool. So it's been fun to dive into the world of serious games and EdTech.
Great. Well, Peggy, Alan, Phaedra, and Alicia, thank you all so much for taking the time to join us this morning. I truly appreciate, and I'm sure those watching did as well. And to our members watching, thank you for joining us. I hope that you, like myself, learned how advancements are being made that empower us to use technology, both in the workplace and in our personal lives. This time of social distancing can be difficult for all of us, and I'm glad that YPN is able to continue offering programs to provide us with some sense of normalcy. As always, please continue to network with other members, even if networking right now may be a little different than we're used to experiencing. I've received many invites to join others for virtual coffee chats and happy hours. I appreciate the invites that I've received from many of you, so one, keep them coming, but also please continue to schedule more with other members as well. I love having the opportunity to connect with one another virtually, and I'm sure members would as well. As a reminder, our YPN directory is a great way to connect with other members. If you have questions about how to access the directory, please feel free to reach out to me. Before we conclude this morning's program, I'd like to highlight the upcoming virtual events that we'll be offering. On Thursday, May 7th from 8 to 9 a.m., we'll be offering our next YPN new member orientation. If you are a new member to YPN or have never attended a YPN new member orientation before, this is a great event for you to attend to learn what benefits come with your YPN membership. As well, on Thursday, May 21st from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m., we'll have our next program that will focus on work-life alignment, a topic that remains important as we all learn how to master working from home. To register for these events and to see all the scheduled events we have for YPN, please visit our website at RaleighYPN.org. Once there, you can click the upcoming events tab to see these events and more. One final thank you from myself and our team at the Raleigh Chamber. To our speakers, we appreciate you joining us and truly enjoyed the information you shared. And to our members, we appreciate your support. We look forward to offering more events for all of you. Everyone have a great rest of the day.